Why? Why expand in your real estate portfolio? Why make your foundation so strong that you can actually expand your real estate empire? We're going to talk about the why a little bit today, and we're going to talk about the what to do. First, we're going to stabilize and talk about stabilization, and then how you know you're stabilized so that you can build from that solid foundation that we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to talk about the 5.5 ways that you can expand your empire. And these are really great ways that kind of take out, I don't know, the risk, I guess, or just make it easy.
We'll make it easy and make it foolproof and safe so
Right.
that, have you ever heard the analogy of building a house of cards? If you've ever been a kid, and I know I was a kid once. Yeah.
For quite a while.
For quite a while, I guess. And I would take my parents' decks of cards and I would try and build a house out of the cards, 4, and then expand and make what I thought was a solid foundation. And with a little gust of wind, my house of cards went crumbling down no matter how. And sometimes it didn't even take a gust of wind. I just didn't have the walls lined up properly or offset correctly. And then the whole thing fell apart. One thing we're certain we don't want to have happen to you or any of our clients or anybody that's listening to the Inside Track on Real Estate is that you, or anybody for that matter, we don't want the real estate that you have to come crumbling down, the foundation to not be strong enough. And so this is all about how do we make that solid foundation so it doesn't function like a house of cards. So welcome back to the Inside Track on Real Estate. And it's where we really look at anything to do with making your house a home and how to really thrive as a family in that home or in the homes or houses that eventually become yours that you can build your life from and on and in.
And I'm Ryan Dekker.
And I'm Yetta Dekker. So together we get to, for over the last 30 years, help families really do just that, thrive at family and life in their homes. And we've helped over 2,380 families do just that. And it's so exciting.
It is exciting.
Like, what an honor and a privilege. Something 30 years ago or over 30 years ago when I thought about going into real estate, I didn't really catch the magnitude of what it would look like years and years later and how we could actually not only build a legacy within our own family, help other families build their own legacy that goes generation to generation. So the points, Ryan.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics because we're not just talking about, the foundation anymore. We're now talking about expansion. And you wanted to say why. Why is this important? Well, one key example, I had a client call me last week. I haven't told you this yet. And so Bill called me and he said, Ryan, I just wanted to let you know, in the last 7 years, because of your help, because of the advice of your parents, because of the properties you've helped us buy, our net worth has gone up more than $400,000. We are no longer in debt. We own over 5 properties. We are expanding our equity every month, like more than his income. It's just incredible. And he just said, I want to say thank you for what you've taught me, what we're doing now. I'm so excited. And I'm actually having him come and share to one of my investor groups specifically what he's doing and how he's done it and where he's invested and how he's invested, because he's an amazing example. And we have many clients who have done this, that he's an amazing example, and he's also very open.
Yeah, he is.
Because not all clients are willing to share what they've done, either fear of feeling too wealthy or fear of someone else taking it or greed or whatever. And that's fair. Privacy is important. But for him, he's willing to be that example because someone was that example for him.
Right. And what I love about Bill and his wife's story is that when I met them, because I know exactly who that particular, because we have many clients whose name is Bill, however, only one that fits that exact story. And when they came to me originally, they were upside down on their mortgage.
Yeah.
They couldn't manage their monthly payments. They had gone through some pretty difficult financial things, and were at the risk of not only losing the house they were in, but really considering, do we declare bankruptcy? Like, it was that horrible for them. And to think that in just 7 years, they've gone from upside down and really thinking we should declare bankruptcy to thriving.
Yeah,
So,
like really thriving.
like really thriving. To think that the rental incomes now outweigh their working income is incredible. Like, incredible.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So we want that for everybody, if that's what you want for yourself.
Right.
Everybody's idea, not everybody's idea is exactly the same. So that's why we want to sit down.
Right. And the why will change for who you are, your stage of life, what you want in the future. So the why is very specific to you, and how we would advise you, and the next step, the next wall to put in your empire will be very specific to your why.
Yeah, very much so.
And so we'll give you the 5.5 ways or the next steps to build these walls. And you may want to come in and just get some clarity on what your why is and which step would probably best suit you.
Right. And really, to establish your why, you can potentially do it on your own. Sometimes it helps to have an outside person asking you the questions. And it's really just, why do you want to build a real estate empire? That's where you start. And you probably need to ask that same question or related based on the answer you're giving probably 7 times till you get to the real answer. Because the real answer isn't just because I can go on more trips or because I can take better care of my family, although those are potentially important reasons. There is usually a very core why for you in this season that will be enough motivation to fight through the things that are difficult, to fight through the horror stories. Ryan mentioned a few minutes ago that not everybody wants to share their success stories. And we have a lot of clients that we've said, do you want to be on the show? Do you want to show others how to do what you've done? It's been such a pleasure and an honor to do it with you. And they've said, we don't want people knowing our business.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable for us. We're grateful that you've helped us do it, and we send you recommendations and specific clients directly to you. So we're advocates of the program and how to go about it, and we just don't want to be public about it. And yet, have you ever noticed, because I certainly have, before I was in real estate, and even as I've been in real estate, I get to hear horror stories. The horror stories, people are eager to tell. I don't really know why that is.
I do. It's
Why?
because they're sensational. People love a good horror movie or a good...
I don't.
I don't either, but that's because we're focused on growth. But generally, the public loves this idea of this is not energizing, but gets a reaction out of me, or it intrigues me, or it startles me, and so people love to be able to do that for other people in their storytelling, to have a good villain, like a tenant, or a flood, or something that's dangerous, and then the turmoil, and it's just exciting to tell and exciting to hear, but it doesn't always move us forward. Sometimes it can. Sometimes it lets you know this is dangerous, don't do this.
Right.
I didn't turn off my pipe in my house and it froze in the winter and flooded the whole basement. I've had clients call me and say, this happened to me. That story should be shared with other landlords so it doesn't happen to them.
Right.
So that kind of stuff is excellent. And we cover all that in an inspection when we help someone buy a house. So that hasn't happened to my clients, but it has happened to clients who call me after the fact and say, I have this problem. So anyways, that stuff should be shared.
Right. And yet the horror stories are more prolific and tend to go further than the success stories.
Yeah.
And so just because you hear a horror story doesn't mean that has to be your story. If it's done right and you expand at the right time. So we're going to talk about, when do you expand? And we did share in the last show that you could expand even when you only had 5% equity in your one house, if you were going to keep that house and move into another house still with 5% down, and you were able to save that money, or maybe pull the equity out of the house you're in a quick length of time. But that's because that was your strategy. So you're going to want to go back to the last show to look at that. So other than that sort of scenario, typically you don't want to expand until you have at least 20 to 40% equity in the house that you're in.
Yeah, in your current property.
In your current property, right. When you may not be living in it.
Yeah. So you want to get every property you have to a minimum of 20. And when you get to 40%, it means it's probably time to expand if you're still in the expansion stage. Right. There's other stages like, retirement or liquidation or, but in the expansion stage, at 40%, it's probably time to expand.
Right. And so a couple of ways that you can help get quicker to the expansion stage is to pay down more of your principal on a regular basis. So maybe lump sum payments at the end of every year if you've been able to be disciplined and set that money aside, or to pay more frequency on your mortgage payments as it goes, or just to pay extra every single time you're making your payments. Make your payments as though you're at a higher interest rate, even though it's now at a lower interest rate, just based on the amount of money you're giving the financial institution that has your mortgage.
So that's how to get to stabilization quicker.
Right. That's what we want to do.
We haven't talked about the points yet.
Not at all.
So that's just about stabilization.
How do you stabilize? How do you get there? Typically, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to get to stabilization, somewhere in that ballpark.
And to me, the definition of stabilization means in the last 3 to 5 years, you've gotten to that 20 to 40%. Your cash flow position has improved, not decreased, because if your rents are costing you money, it means something's not going on right, or it's just not stabilization. Right. So you want to move towards that. Your knowledge base should have grown. So your second investment should always be better than your first because you've learned something along the way. If you don't feel you can make a better decision and your first decision wasn't great, you're not ready to expand.
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons why you're not ready to expand, but there's some key elements that when you have them, it's time.
Right. So in addition to the education, in addition to the 20 to 40% equity in at least that property or any properties you want to expand from, as well as increasing your knowledge base, you also want to have some cash on hand. Yeah. Ideally, you want to have more cash position so that you've got closing costs. You don't have to borrow for those, so that your second investment ideally is not as tight to get into as was your first. Yep. That's part of stabilizing. And for some people, it may take 7 years or 8 years or 9 years. We have found that on average for our clients, it takes 3 to 5. Some have done it quicker and some have done it a little bit slower because it also depends, where are you?
Well, and some people have been stable for 10 years and they haven't even thought about expanding. And then they're like, oh, I can expand? Weird. And so we help them expand, and I'm going to talk more about this later. And they end up buying 5 properties in 3 years because they were waiting. Exactly. They just didn't know they could. So they're in an amazing position to expand. Now, if they expanded 5 years ago, would they be further ahead today than they are buying 5? Yes, they would. Mm-hmm. But they're still in an amazing position.
Right.
So before we get into the points, I do want to do a cautionary tale.
Oh, a cautionary tale.
I had a coach, and I'm going to call him Phil. And his name's not Phil. And Phil decided that when he was young, I think he was 23 or something, that he was a millionaire. And he was. He owned, I think it was like 30 or 40 properties. The problem was he only had 2 or 3% somehow, I'm not sure how he did it, in each property. So he had, $1 million equity, but then one thing went wrong. He had to pull money from one property, which made him have to pay taxes. It cascaded down. It ended up taking him 3 years to go bankrupt, lost everything, had to start from scratch. So this cautionary tale is about...
and it's not a tale, it's a real life thing.
No, it's a real thing. This is a friend of mine.
I know.
Yeah, I'm changing the name for,
To protect.
To protect. So that being said, expanding is really important, but the stabilization piece we're talking on is fundamental to future success. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the stabilization, it's not time to expand. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means chill out. Patience is good. It's a virtue. I've learned it. That it's a virtue. I haven't necessarily learned patience yet, but I'm getting there. I know it's a virtue. How's that? It's a good start.
That's a very good
It's a
start.
good start. So that being said, just chill out, get to that stabilization. It is a goal in itself.
Right. So for stabilization, point number 1, Ryan.
For stabilization or for expansion?
For expansion,
We're in
because
expansion
we've now done the stabilization. We've spent half the show talking about stabilization. Do you think we're a little concerned about somebody expanding too soon? Because those horror stories are real.
Right.
And they
don't need to be.
They don't need to be. They break my
need to be.
heart because they're not necessary.
Right.
So we're now stable.
Great. Let's
and
expand.
we're ready to expand.
Let's do it. This is my favorite part.
So number 1, just watch the energy go through the roof. Save and purchase.
Right.
Expand on that, Ryan.
So it just means every month you're taking some money and you're throwing it into an account and you're saying, I'm going to buy a house someday. The other way you could be doing this is saving inside your current house, paying off the mortgage. Then you're saving, 4% roughly in interest payments every year. And then later you can use that money.
Right. So that's number
but for
1
now,
is
it's
use
really
the
about
money.
Save and purchase.
Right.
I kind of went into the next point, which is re-leveraging.
So save and purchase is really point number 1 in being able to expand.
Right.
It's sort of finalizing that stability point.
Yep.
And now we've got the money, we've got everything to go, and we're ready to take our money and go buy something.
Yeah, and you could buy something if you're moving into it at 5% down.
Yeah.
Or you could buy it as a rental and then you need 20% down, so a fair bit more cash.
Or depending on what type of rental, you might even need 30 or 40% down. And we are going to add another little tiny caveat here. This is March 8th as we're recording the show in 2019. And the mortgage laws and the mortgage regulations are forever changing. They've been changing significantly over the last couple of years. And it's mostly to protect you. And it's to protect the institutions that are lending you the money.
Yeah, and it's getting more expensive and harder and longer, and lending's getting tougher.
Right. And so
the more cookie cutter you are, the better.
Right. The less complicated your situation, the better. So there's lots of creativity that can take place here, and we're giving you kind of the solid approach forward. So number 2.
So this is almost like number 1. It's re-leveraging. So you're taking the equity out of the house. You've been, paying it off. Your equity has gone up, or your property value has gone up. So you're taking some of that equity out, and you're buying a rental property.
Right.
Or you're taking some of it out and buying a residence and renting out your current, depending on your foundation strategy that we talked about last week. And so you can read more about this in the Wealth Formula. Put the Pedal to the Metal is the chapter, page 158. It's an excellent book. And we talked about you're wanting to educate yourself. So come see us, get educated. Read this book, read other books. There's some really great books on investing in Canada and Ottawa, more Canada than Ottawa specifically. And we talked about that last week, so I'm not going to talk about it now.
And the reason we're suggesting page 158 specifically, not that we don't want you to read the whole book, it's just that's the part that deals specifically with how to leverage and re-leverage and buy a rental property.
Yeah.
So number 3.
This is about, I already covered this kind of. So this is about moving and keeping the property, which keep it as a rental, move to another one.
Right. So as you can tell as we're having this conversation, we did prepare in length prior to getting on the air, is the strategies, because they're interchangeable, they kind of meld together.
And depending on your why, and your life situation. So something I've learned recently is life can happen. And when life happens, your strategy needs to change. The best laid plans become horror stories. If you can't shift, depending on your situation, your family dynamics, your health, a death, there's so many reasons why you'd need to shift. And so building a strategy is vital.
Right.
Being able to shift is just as vital.
Right. Being able to pivot.
Pivot.
From where, right?
I like that word. Pivot.
Yeah. Pivot from what you thought you were going to do to now what makes the most sense to do.
Yeah.
And so, Ryan, I know for you, and we'll share just a quick story, you actually bought an investment property, which we've talked about before. You've bought more than one investment property. You're actually doing it a second time right now, where you've bought an investment property. It was a rental. You lived in it.
Yeah.
And then you moved.
Yeah.
And yet you kept it.
Yeah. So there's some key things that we're not going to talk about today about when you move out, how that affects tax and how to limit your tax and how to get appraisals and when to get appraisal, all those things to make sure you're paying less tax because it was
the appropriate amount of tax.
Yeah, right. Because if you do it wrong, they're going to charge you as if it was an income property the whole time instead of your residence.
Right.
So there's ways to make sure that you can prove it.
Right. So if you're going to be leaving a property that used to be your residence, even though it may have been shared accommodation, and now you're turning it into a true investment property, meaning you don't live there at all anymore, you want an appraisal as at date, so you have something to base your taxes on.
When you sell it eventually.
Right.
What this means is you're in a place, it's a great place, but you've outgrown it, or you want to be in a different area, and you decide, hey, it's time to move, but it's a great property, and I don't want to sell it. So you go buy another property, and you keep this one. And you can buy the other one, like we said, at 5% down or 20% down.
Because you're moving into it.
Because it's your residence. So the interest rate you're going to pay to the mortgage company will generally be lower. And the property you were in, unless it's at renewal date, will generally stay where it was, which will be lower because it was a residence, not a rental. You do have to obviously call your insurance people and make them make the appropriate changes. But again, we're not getting too much into that.
Right.
But move and keep. It's an amazing strategy. I love it for tax reasons, for income. It's a really good strategy.
And then number 4 is sell and upgrade.
Right.
So you're saying, you know what, the property I'm living in right now is not an ideal rental property, or I paid down the mortgage so much because I've waited so long to get into the next phase of rental properties or into investing in real estate. And really, tax implications are not favorable to keep that house and turn it into an investment.
Right.
So instead, what Ken and I have done several times, although we've owned lots of investment properties, is we have sold that principal residence that we were living in and upgraded or moved to the right size. What now works for us, whether it's location or whether it's different reasons. And we've done lots of shows on sort of our journey and give you an example of how you might do it or when it's right time to move and all that sort of stuff. So one strategy number 4, is to sell, and I'm going to call it upgrade, but to sell and shift.
Yeah.
Because it may not be an upgrade.
No,
it
not
may
always.
be
Could
that
be a downsize too.
It could be that I'm moving to something smaller because I don't need that big space. However, that particular house I'm living in is not an ideal investment property.
Right. And so just one example of that would be well and septic. Generally not a great rental because you don't know how your tenant's going to treat the septic. And then if it goes, the bed, you're out $25,000, which can have a massive, massive impact on your overall financial, portfolio.
And we've done that in the early days of owning rental property.
Right. And I've bought one that I know has a bad septic. So it's not that septics are the problem, it's that when the rentals, there's a lot more risk. And we like to alleviate as much risk as we can from people's investment portfolios, especially unneeded risk.
Right. Another way to expand, Ryan.
Where are we?
Additions to or add units, number 5.
Yeah.
We're at point number 5.
Thank you. Getting too excited here. So additions to units. This one is almost the 5.5 because it can be risky for people who don't know what they're doing. So I'm not quite cautioning this one, but I'm real close. So addition, and there's so many ways to do this. You can add a basement apartment, which many people do. You can turn a duplex into a triplex, or you could actually build an entire unit or convert a garage if it has plumbing and stuff already. There's lots of ways to add a unit to where you already are. And generally, the cost to doing that will be much lower percentage-wise to the rent you get than if you bought a whole new property.
Right.
It will usually be about double or triple percentage rate return doing that. So that can be an excellent way to maximize expanding what you already have.
Right. And if you're thinking, wow, lots of details, you've gone off on a few piggy trails, because we don't go on rabbit trails, we go on piggy trails because it's all about wealth and putting money in that piggy bank. we would be more than willing to structure an appointment with Ken Dekker, actually, because he's the author of the Wealth Formula. Anyway, not that I'm not all over it, not that Ryan's not all over it. However, if you would love a free, it's actually, there's no cost to you. It's free 99 to meet with Ken and just go, where should I be? I feel like I'm stable. And now how do I build from there? He will guaranteedly give you your next 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and you'll be able to see how to move forward from there. And that could be really valuable. So if it is, you know how to reach out to us. So point 5.5
Yes.
is rezone to increase the value.
So there is a lot of wealth that is made doing this. Rezoning and increasing the value, severing a property. There is so much wealth made here. It's incredible. There's also, it's a very expensive game to get into. As you know, most of the builders, the big builders, they go and buy huge tracts of land. They're 20 years out in their mindset. They're buying it at today's prices, knowing that in 20 years they're going to be able to rezone it. It's not for today. So that's your competition.
Right.
So you may be able to find a small opportunity where you can convert something or buy a few properties, merge them. Like, there's definitely opportunities out there.
And it's something we've helped people do, and it's something we've done ourselves.
It's a more advanced strategy.
It is.
And it costs more money.
Right.
So it wouldn't generally be your first or second expansion.
No.
It would normally be much further along, but it's definitely an amazing way to expand.
Right. And sometimes you can do it with partners. You can find a group of people. You can do it within a corporation. I know one of the ones Ken did not too long ago is he bought a block of kind of run-down building, and it was on a big piece of land, and you didn't need that much land for that block, so they were able to sell off a good portion of land that somebody else could develop because they didn't want to take it on right now, although that would have been another potential strategy, and then take the money from selling that big chunk of land and put it into renovations, increase the value of the property, and get great rents from it.
Right. And even the person who bought that land converted it from, I think it was only allowed to go 4 stories, and they turned it into 12 stories. Right. So dad severed it, created some wealth. They took it, they rezoned it, they created more wealth again. So subzoning or severancing and then rezoning, repurposing, like there's a lot of money to be there. It's also not, and I think they haven't even started building, and they've been there for years and years and years now with the zoning. So it's a very expensive game.
And fantastic if you're building, because this is about expanding.
Yep.
So if you want to expand your real estate empire through real estate, you can do it with very little stress, as long as you do it systematically. So if you're looking for more insight and information, give us a shout and we will help you do that. We love that we get to partner with you in moving forward together, because together we got this.